Hey, and welcome back to another video. And in this video, we're going to take a look at how we can integrate light and dark mode in our SwiftUI apps. Light and dark mode allows you to change your application based on the user's preferred device appearance. We're going to look at the setting in the device for light and dark mode for both colors, images, and how to handle this programmatically as well. So let's get into this now. So the first thing I want to do is show you how you can set light and dark themes using assets directly in Xcode. You can learn more about this in my video, Manage Colors in Xcode and Image in Xcode as well. Let's go into our Xcode's assets file and we're going to add a new color called primary. So what you want to do is go into your side panel here and then click on assets. And then once you finish doing that, the next thing you want to do is click the plus button here. And you should see a whole bunch of options for assets that you can create. But in our case, the one we want to look into now is color set. So let's just add that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to name this color primary with a capital P. So I'm just going to close this so we can get more space. I'm just going to click on primary. When you're working with colors, you actually have a panel here on the right hand side where you can actually customize how you want your colors to appear within your apps. The option that we want to look at is the appearances option here, which actually has 3 options that you can choose from. So let's just discuss each one now. So what none will do is this will actually just set the color to just one single color. So no matter what theme or appearance I should say your device is on, it will always display the color like this. So if you want to have like a color for light and dark mode and you don't really want that to change, then it's the option for you. The next one you have is any dark. So any dark means any appearance that isn't dark mode, it will use this color, and on dark mode it will use this color specifically here. And then the third option that you have is any light and dark. For this option, any device in dark mode, it will use this option here with this color set. Light mode, it will use this option. Any device that doesn't support light or dark mode at all, then it will actually default back to the any appearance color as well. So if you're using a device that doesn't have a light or dark mode capability, then you can use this color as your default. The option that we want to use is we don't want to use this one here. We actually want to use the appearances where it's any and dark. So let's just use that now. And then what I'm going to do is I actually have some colors predefined for my light and dark mode, just so I'm going to add these in and then we'll break them down. Okay, cool. So what I've done in here is I've added 2 colors. So for any appearance, it's going to be this blue. And for the devices that are in dark mode, it's going to be this darker blue as well. So let's actually see this in action now. Now, what I like to do when I'm working with colors is I don't actually like to type in the color name directly into my SwiftUI views. I like to kind of create some kind of enum called a theme, which has static properties that you can use to access these colors. So let's go into our content view. And at the top of our file, I'm going to create this theme just to show you what it looks like. We have a static constant here that we can access called primary, which has the access to the color primary. So now I don't need to keep on repeating color primary everywhere within my application. I can just say theme.primary, or if I had a parameter of type theme, I could just say .primary if I wanted to. Now let's actually see how we can use this to fill up the screen of our app with the color that we define for our primary color. So let's click on text and I'm going to embed this in a Z-stack, and then at the top here of our Z-stack, the first one, we're going to use our theme color like so. Okay, cool. So as you can see, you can now see our color. So what's actually going on here is we're filling up the whole screen with our color, but our SwiftUI preview by default is actually showing us the color in light mode. What about if I wanted to actually preview what this color looks like in dark mode as well? Well, with the SwiftUI preview, you can actually add in another configuration to display both light and dark mode. Now, the easiest way to do this, you actually could type this out if you wanted to, but a quick way to do this is to use the actual GUI that is available to us in the SwiftUI previews. So I'm actually going to create a duplicate here by hitting this button here on the preview, and this will now create another content view for me, as you can see. And what we can do is we can choose this option to actually modify our view within our SwiftUI preview. So let's just choose this one, and then I'm going to explicitly say that I want this scheme to be in light mode like so. And you can see that it's automatically added in the modifier for me, and I'm going to give this a name of light mode. So now our preview name has also updated to light mode, so we know this is specifically for light mode. And I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom for our second content preview, and I'm going to do a similar thing. So for the name, we'll say dark mode. And then for the color scheme, this time we're going to say dark. And now you should see that your SwiftUI preview automatically adds in all the modifiers, but this time it's actually displaying our view in specifically light and dark mode. And if we wanted to, we could actually just add in a new one here called inherited. And remove the color scheme, and this will just show what the device will look like when it inherits the default style within the SwiftUI preview. So now we can actually work with our views and see all the different variants based on their color scheme's appearance. So now we've done that, let's actually see how we can actually get this same effect, but rather than in the SwiftUI preview, on the actual simulator within Xcode. So I'm just going to run this on the simulator now. So now we've got this run on the simulator, you can see that by default our simulator is actually in light mode. So if I want to toggle this to dark mode, what I want to do is I want to go to features and toggle appearance, and now you'll see that it changes to dark mode like so. If I want to change it back, I can just go back here and do toggle appearance. Now if you're someone who likes to use shortcut, you can also use the hotkey, the up command and A, but I can never remember hotkeys, so I never used them. Okay, so now that we saw how to use the simulator to toggle light and dark mode, what I want to do now is show you how we can actually use this light and dark mode feature, but specifically for images. Well, what I actually have is some images that I've grabbed from Flat Icon, just so we can display the weather in either light mode or dark mode depending on what the user's device is set to. So if we just go to this folder that I have here, just to show you these two images. So I just have a moon and I also have a sun. Now I'm only going to use these two images as single PNGs. Normally what you want to do is you want to actually add them in as 1x, 2x and 3x when they're PNGs. Or if they're an SVG, you want to set that as a single scale. And I actually covered that in that video that I mentioned called Image in SwiftUI. So what we want to do now is actually add in these two images to our Xcode project. Now, in order to do that, what I'm just going to do is I'm going to leave the simulator running here because we're going to need that later. So I'll just make this smaller so we can just see the SwiftUI preview. Now, we want to go back into our assets folder, but this time when we actually create a new asset, we want this to be a new image set. Cool. Now, this image set, I'm going to call it weather icon, like so. Okay, cool. And on the right hand side panel for the image set, you'll notice that you actually have an option here in appearances as well. Now right now this is set to none, meaning that by default we'll always use these three images. But what you could do if you wanted to is you could actually change this to be any dark or any light dark like we specified before for our color. Now I'm going to choose any dark, and now we actually get 6 slots. So we actually have 3 slots for any appearance and we have 3 slots for dark mode. So we can actually choose now how we want our images to look for light and dark mode. Now what I'm going to do is actually just add in these images. Okay, cool. So within our folder, what I'm just going to do is just drag in our moon for our dark slot and our sun for our any appearance. So essentially what we're saying here is that for any appearance, always show the sun, but if it's dark mode, then specifically show this moon. Okay, cool. Now, like I mentioned before, you would normally have the 2x, 3x, and versions of these, but just for the sake of this tutorial, I'm only going to stick to the 1x versions as well. Cool. So now let's actually look at how we can use this within our applications. So like I said before, how I like to actually have a enum to access our colors, I actually like to do a similar thing when I'm working with images as well. So on our content view, we're going to create a new enum this time, and it's going to be called assets, and it's going to allow us to access the weather icon. So let's do that now. Cool. So similar to before, we have another enum assets, and we can now just say assets.weather to access this image view within our content view, which is what we're going to do now. So in our Z-stack, we're going to remove our text and we're going to add in our image. So let's do that now. Cool. So what we're saying here is we've got our weather icon, we've made it resizable, and we've set the frame of it to be 100 by 100. So if we actually just update our SwiftUI preview, we should now see our icon on the screen. Cool. So you can see for the inherited, it's defaulted to light mode, so we can now see our sun. And if we scroll down to light mode, we specifically said light mode, so it's going to also show the sun. But if we go down to dark mode, we can now see our moon on the screen because we said that if it's in dark mode, we want to show the moon, which is great. So let's actually just run this on our simulator again to see what happens. And you can see here, by default, our simulator was set to light mode. And if I actually toggle the appearance to dark mode, you'll see how we get that nice animation and it fades to dark mode with a new background and the new image. So we've actually saw now how we can handle specifically and explicitly saying that we want the color to be this in light and dark mode and images as well. But what about if we actually want to display some text depending on the user's theme? So what about if I want to display some information on the screen to tell the user that they're in light or dark mode? We can't actually define, variants of that within the assets folder. So how could we do that? Well, in order to do that, we actually need to use an environment value called color scheme. So let's actually add this in now, and then we'll break it down. Okay, cool. So let me just reduce the size of this. Cool. So what we're saying here is we actually want to access the color scheme on the device. So what this property is going to tell us if the device is in light or dark mode. And this is just one of many environment values that you have access to within your SwiftUI apps. Now, what we're able to do here, because we've accessed the color scheme, is we're actually able to check to see if the device is in light or dark mode and tell our SwiftUI view to react to these changes. So let's do that now. So what I'm going to do is actually add in a string, which is a compute property that tells me whether the user is in that appearance. So let's do that now. So now we have this private computer property that tells us the weather text we want to show on the screen depending on the color scheme. As you can see here, we're using the ternary operator to say if the color scheme is equal to light, then show daytime, or else show nighttime. Now let's actually add this into our VStack with some text below our image. Okay, so now we've added in our text and it's just using the string from our computer property, and we've said here that we want to set the font to this style as well as the foreground color to be white for this text on the screen. So if we hit resume, you can now see that on dark mode it actually says nighttime because we're reacting to this color scheme and it hits this option here. And if we scroll up, when we actually check the color scheme is equal to light, it's actually using daytime because that is what we explicitly set the color scheme to here. And then on inherited is inheriting the default here, which is light mode, which is why you see that here. So one thing that we actually did here is we actually explicitly said that we wanted the text to be white. But what if we actually just take off this, what happens? You'll notice that in inherited, our text is black. In light mode, our text is black. But if we go all the way down to dark mode, our text is actually white. So what's going on here? Well, what's happening here is the system is actually deciding for you based on whether the device is in light or dark mode what color the text should be. So by default in SwiftUI, when you're working with text, you actually get this capability for free. Now, if you don't want it to react to the colors depending on light mode or dark mode, what you have to do is what I specifically did here, where you essentially override that color and say, I want you to explicitly be white. Cool. So now this looks good on both of our SwiftUI previews. But what I want to look into now is how we can actually force our SwiftUI views to change into light, dark, or system and persist this in our user defaults. If you want to learn more about user defaults, then check out my video, App Storage and User Defaults in SwiftUI, as well as pickers in SwiftUI as well. What we're going to do first is actually build our picker, which we will use to show the options that a user can select from. Now, in order to do this, we're going to actually create an enum called scheme type, which will have three cases: system, light, and dark. And I'll break that down now. Okay, cool. So we have our enum scheme type, and we've said that we want it to be a type integer. And the reason why we've set this to be a type of integer is so that we can actually save the raw value for each one of these cases within user defaults. And then we make it identifiable so we can actually uniquely access each item when we want to loop through them in our picker. And we also make it case iterable so that we can automatically get an array of all the different possible cases for free. Now, I actually want to give each one of our themes a title to show within the picker. So let's actually create an extension on scheme type with a property called title so we can display some kind of string within our picker. So as you can see here, we've now created a new title string, and within this string property, we're going to check what the case is, and depending on that case, we're just going to return a string with some different text and a different emoji, so it's clear that they're different. Now, before we actually add in our picker, I want to add in the app storage that we will be using to handle saving the user setting to user defaults. So let's add this in now. This is our app storage key within user default, and it's called system theme val, and its type here is integer. And the reason why it's integer is because we're not able to save enums directly to user defaults at the time of this recording. So what we actually do is we use the integer's raw value to figure out what scheme type we want to save, and also what scheme type that raw value maps to when we retrieve it out of app storage. And then what we say here is we want to set the default of it to be the first case within our scheme type. And we're able to use this first case because we set the case iterable protocol on our enum. Now let's actually add in our picker into our VStack and use the enum cases to show our titles and our raw value as each one of its identifier. So within our picker, we're binding the selection to our app storage because we're able to read and write from this. And then we just have a for each loop within our picker, which accesses all the cases within our enum scheme type. And then we access the title within that extension that we created before. And it's very important that we do this. We actually set a unique tag on each text so it can uniquely identify which one is selected using the raw value from the enum that matches the system type integer here, as you can see here. And then we just added a label here that just says pick theme, and we'll just add a bit of styling on top of this as well so it just looks a bit nicer. So before we actually carry on, let's actually just see what this looks like when we render it on the screen. And now you should see that we actually have our picker on the screen with our three options when we select it. So at the moment, it's not actually doing anything in terms of actually changing the UI, because what we want is we want to actually update the UI to actually mimic the option that we selected. So if I choose light, I actually want this to switch to light mode. So what we want to do is we want to create a computer property called selected theme, and then based on the value within the app storage, we're going to update the UI to use the color scheme value. So I'm going to type this out and then we'll break it down. So what I've said here is I want the selected scheme to be of type color scheme, which is the type that we use, the system uses for light and dark mode. If I just click into it, so you can see here, the color scheme actually has two options, light and dark. So this is the system. I've not actually created this. And then within here, we then get the raw value from user defaults, as you can see here. So I just break this up to create a bit more space. So we then get the raw value from user defaults. If it can match that raw value to a case within our enum, then we can continue. If not, then we'll exit early and return nil. And we'll discuss how we handle nil in a second. And then within our case here, if the theme matches the scheme type light, then we'll return light. If it matches dark, then we'll return dark. Or else, if it doesn't match any of these, then we're just going to return nil, like so. So think of this as our truth table for handling which color scheme gets handled. So now that we actually have this in place, we're not actually using this anywhere yet on our SwiftUI view. So we need to explicitly tell our SwiftUI view to set the color scheme. So how do we do this? Well, in SwiftUI, there's actually two ways of handling this. And the first way we're going to go over is using the environment. So let's actually see how we can do this. So what we want to do, in order to actually set the scheme on all the views within the screen, you want to apply this onto the parent view. So you don't want to have to add this manually onto every single view. You want the parent view to have it, and then you want all the children view to basically pick up this scheme. Now you only want to do this in that situation. If you want to specifically target a view, then you want to use this modifier on that specific view. So the modifier you can use is the environment modifier. So let's do that now. So in the environment, you're able to set the color scheme like so. Now, if you notice something, you'll see here the environment modifier that basically sets the color scheme here on for the whole app, it actually only accepts two values, which is light and dark. So you can't actually give it a nil value. So you can only ever specify these two, light and dark. Now in our case, we want to use light, dark, and nil. And what nil represents is if you don't want to have specifically light or dark, you just want to use whatever the device is currently set to. So how do we get around that? Well, if you're someone who needs to use these two cases for just light and dark, then this is fine. But in our use case, we actually want to set the color scheme on the view, and we can do that by using a modifier called preferred color scheme. So let's do that now. And now when you use this modifier, you should notice that your error goes away. So this function here actually accepts an optional color scheme, so you can actually give it light, dark, or nil, and nil would essentially just be nothing. So if we actually just run this now, you should see that when we selected light, our UI updated to light mode. We select dark, it changes to dark mode, and we select system, it uses the system setting that it's been set to, which is great. So this all works fine. So in order to actually see this working with the app storage, let's actually just run this on our simulator to see what happens. So I'm just going to run this again on the simulator. So if I now set this to be in light mode, we should see that it now updates our UI. And if I change that to dark mode, it's all good. Now if I actually toggle the appearance here, so we now should be in light mode. If I go to system, you can see here that it actually picks up that the device is in light mode. So if I actually stop this from running after, if I select dark mode again, and I actually stop this from running now, if I run this again, you should see that the app picks up that we were last in dark mode. And if I was to choose this to system and I stop this from running and I restart it again, you can now see that it picks up from user defaults that the last state we saved was in system. Okay, cool. Okay, cool. So that's everything in this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate it if you left some feedback in the comment section below, as well as liking the video if you haven't already, and subscribing to the channel, as well as hitting the notification bell to get updates for whenever I release a new video. That's everything from me. I'll catch you on a bit. Deuces.